Hello everyone and welcome to episode 67 of The Sydneyist, the best radio show in Sydney, on Sydney, or so we like to say. I'm Elizabeth Farrelly and we're broadcasting from the Alan Slate studio at Eastside Radio on 89.7 FM or streaming on eastsidefm.org. So, we're talking today about architecture, specifically with regard to the Commonwealth. Is the Commonwealth a curious, dusty old thing, a garment we've outgrown, or is it actually a useful vehicle for learning, collaboration and much-needed change? My guest this evening is Hugo Chan, a young Sydney architect who was recently elected as, I think this is the right title, Youth Representative to the Commonwealth Association of Architects. Right, Hugo?
Yep.
Welcome. Thank you for being here.
Thank you. It's lovely to be here.
So look, tell us first of all, what is this new CAA youth rep role?
Yeah.
And how did you come by it?
Sure. So the Commonwealth Association of Architects is an organisation of member institutions. So it's all the institutes of architectures from across the Commonwealth coming together and I suppose forming a super organisation to maximise the contribution of architects and to see what we can do to improve the built environment. The youth role that I was elected to is fairly new. I'm the second person to hold the role, and I'm the first Australian to do so. And it was created following, I think, in 2021, the CHOGM meeting where they started to shift focus towards youth because a study was done to find that across the Commonwealth there are currently 2.7 billion people. 60% of that population are aged under 29. And so there's this massive community. That
makes this one of the fast breeding parts of the world, is that right?
Yes, absolutely. And so there was this need for us to start thinking about, what is the current and upcoming generation of architects and architecture students going to do, particularly in the face of the climate crisis, which is probably the dominating problem of our age.
Absolutely. So there is this idea not only of doing the right thing for architects, but getting architects to do the right thing for the world.
Yes, exactly.
Yes. So what is it that architects can do in that case? As you say, the growth of the Commonwealth countries is immense, at least the projected growth is immense. And of course, that's mainly in towns and cities, and towns and cities already contribute 70%, I think it is, to greenhouse emissions on the planet. So there's a huge responsibility there, but there's also, I suspect, in those countries a huge vulnerability to climate change. So what is it that architects can do in that situation?
I think do better is the short answer. I think we're very fortunate in Australia in many ways because we're not bearing the brunt of the climate crisis.
Not yet.
Not yet. But there are so many of our members. So, for example, in our recent awards, we awarded the Environmental Impact Award to the Rwanda I'm going to get this wrong. The Rwanda Institute for Conservation Agriculture, RICA, designed by Mass Design Studio, which is an American and Rwanda-based architecture practice. They started their brief by being carbon neutral and are aiming to be carbon positive.
That's pretty impressive.
Yes, as their kind of mandate. There's also...
So, sorry, just a bit more on that, because that's really interesting. Now, I was having a look at that project, and it's very cool. It's very beautiful, apart from anything else, but it's also, as you say, set to be the first climate-positive campus of its kind, or so it says. And it's also promoting, the whole point of the campus is to promote regenerative agriculture in Rwanda with small farmers.
Yes.
Which is pretty exciting.
Yes, and I think that's one of these things, and why it deserved its Environmental Impact Award in the eyes of the CAA, is that it started off with with the architects understanding that to design a campus like that, they also have to understand the curriculum. Yes. And so there was actually a very close collaboration between the architect and the professors who...
The clients,
the
essentially.
clients. To do that, there was an entire kind of process of procurement where they focused on sourcing sustainable materials. They've tried very hard, for example, their foundation, when they were working through it, they ended up using locally quarried stone to substitute for concrete to reduce the amount of concrete that they'd have to do. They trained, I think, something like 300 people during this process to learn about rammed earth. And those people have now actually... they've been trained so successfully that they've now gone to other parts of Rwanda to kind of continue this trend of building out of rammed earth.
That's cool.
So
it's a ripple effect.
Yes,
really.
and it's this whole sort of system of thinking about, we're not, as architects, just coming in to build a building, but we're thinking about the entire... from a client point of view, the entire education system that they want to create, and the building has to speak to that, but also the construction process, the construction materials. And
rammed earth is kind of amazing, isn't it? I mean, it's difficult. It sounds easy, and you think, I could build a house out of dirt, but it's actually quite complicated, isn't it?
Yes.
And you do have to learn how to do it properly.
Yes.
But I wonder whether you think there's a future for that as a material in Australia.
I've actually seen examples of that. I think the names of architects in Sydney at the moment escape my mind, but I've seen several very beautiful examples of rammed earth being done in Australia.
In Sydney?
Yes, and in, I suppose, regional New South Wales as well, so across the country. So we're not that far behind in some respects. Yes.
Is it cheaper? Like, would it be... I saw something recently of about 3D printing. This is slightly sideways. 3D printing in mud, or I suppose it was in earth of some admixture, which sounds quite cool. It takes it from sounding like a sort of rustic material to something which is futuristic, potentially. And you wonder whether, whether, for example, the earth is going to wash away. Is it reinforced? I mean, is it mixed with cement?
Yes, my understanding is, I suppose, that the technical details, I'd actually recommend re-listening to the CPG, which is probably something I should do, which is part of our program of education for architects, that this is freely available. I think on your cost point, I think we had another award winner, the Social Impact Award, which was also interestingly awarded to a school, but a primary school, called Calling Academy Stellenbosch in South Africa by Salt Architects. I think they, in their award submission, said that they were able to extend the campus by doubling its footprint, by growing the campus at a cost of about $560 per square meter, which I think we can only dream of as a construction cost here in Australia.
So this is a high school, is that right?
Primary school predominantly, from memory. Yep.
Yes, that also looks pretty interesting because it's a school. It's privately run, I think, but it's also beautiful and also uses very local and very, if you like, natural materials, but generates this sense amongst the students of, I think they talked about feeling, one of the kids on the video I was watching said where he came from in South Africa, not many kids had present fathers, and so the school was a father, and the school builds that sense of a perception of fatherhood into its mission, which is pretty interesting and lovely. Yes,
and it's that idea of architecture, I suppose, creating a sense of community that makes these campus environments, it's not perhaps what we may consider beautiful in the sense of, fancy materials
slick.
Or luxury. Not that kind of slick beauty, but, it is absolutely regional to its context and appreciates and understands its context. Obviously, the academy and, once again, the curriculum is part of, I think, this driving factor behind it, which is a very interesting exercise in thinking, once again, about how we approach a design problem. That it's not just a building on a site, but we actually take into consideration the social and the cultural aspects of site and of place as well.
Yeah, it's interesting. I'm looking at both of these projects. I stole some little images from the website, and in the agricultural college campus, there are two buildings that caught my eye. One was the big, I think it's probably the mess hall essentially, which has got this big outdoor space with very high kind of timber roofs where kids, students, I suppose, sit and eat and obviously talk and learn as well together, which is sort of like an open porch. And feels very like a good response to the local climate. But there's also a residential building, which is like a figure 8.
Yes.
Which is so pretty. And it sort of gives this sense of, it does suggest a sense of community and of, I think they're essentially dorms. And so there's the inside, the holes in the 8, if you like, which provides a kind of community space. And then there's the shared dorms and then there's the outside. So it's very... I suppose the question in my mind is, to what extent does architecture actually do that thing of creating community, do you think?
I think it has the power to do that if done well. I'm perhaps speaking more personally and idealistically maybe.
We like idealism here.
The figure 8 that you talk about is exactly one of those examples. It's created that opportunity into courtyards essentially. For these kind of interactions to occur. But then, of course, beyond that, there's the more formal, I suppose, traditional campus, if you will, of institutional buildings, where then, the learning might take place. But in that sense, I suppose what Mass Design Group was able to achieve is create the conditions across the different scales, which requires, of course, understanding, once again, how their curriculum works, how the university, or the institute rather, wants to position itself, and then enabling all of those different opportunities to take place.
So does the CAA, the Commonwealth Association of Architects, do they play a role in, generating these projects, or is it do they just sort of recognise them when they happen?
Yeah. Not directly. So because we're a registered charity based in the United Kingdom, we have a very tiny operating budget of about £40,000. That's published on the charity's website. That's about
quite small.
Yeah, that's about I think 90,000 Australian dollars, which is nothing considering we have, and we're a small team of volunteers of about there are 9 of us on the council, and then we have an education committee and a practice committee. But
this is the youth council. This is
the whole council. Yep.
Wow, that's the whole thing.
So and then on the youth side, there's myself, and then there are 3 who represent the architects on a linked organisation called the Commonwealth Youth for Sustainable Urbanisation, which is an interdisciplinary initiative. But basically, there's the 4 of us, myself and Joanna, who's based in Trinidad and Tobago. Sorry, Sienna is based in Trinidad and Tobago. Joanna is based in Rwanda, and Mahiat, who's based in Bangladesh. So there's 4 of us who kind of collectively, I suppose, represent youth, which, as I mentioned earlier, is 60% of the Commonwealth population, so about 1.6 billion.
That's a lot of people.
Yeah.
Do we have any idea how many architects there are? I suppose
we're actually working on that. So that's part of my current initiative, which I suppose we're only able to do through this kind of Commonwealth network. Is next year I commence the survey. Well, it's more a census really of architecture students and early career professionals. So youth, I suppose, is defined roughly between the ages of 18 to 35, so that covers currently the millennials and Gen Z. And we're trying to ascertain at the moment how we have numbers around how many architecture schools there are, but also how many are currently enrolled, how many graduate, how many then actually not only graduate with that degree, but enter the architecture profession, and then looking at what challenges do all of these people across the Commonwealth currently feel like they're facing.
And is there a sense that you can sort of mobilise this wave of young energy to do good things?
That's the hope. I think. I think being able to work together, but first figure out what everyone's concerns are and the challenges that they face will, I think, be at least the starting point.
How many countries in the Commonwealth?
56.
That's a lot, isn't it? Yeah. I'm trying not to think this is the Brits trying to make reparations for empire for having undermined those countries for such a long time. But in many cases, that's true, isn't it?
Yes, I know, and the idea of the legacy of colonialism is a very tough question, and I think many people have an awareness of what colonialism has done. It's a terrible history,
especially in places like Jamaica and
yes, exactly,
and Australia, I suppose. But,
yeah, and we're still grappling with that legacy today. But I think for me personally, I've operated perhaps subconsciously with what the American Vice President Kamala Harris expressed during her campaign, which is that I can imagine what can be and be unburdened by what has been. And, you know, part of the work that we do in the CAA is acknowledging that there are these entrenched systems of inequality, but that there are also commonalities in these systems, firstly through language, that, you know, through English, but also through the legal system.
That's interesting. The whole English thing is interesting, isn't it? Because that, although you might see that as a legacy of empire, and obviously it is, there's a huge benefit in being able to just talk to each other.
Yes, and there are linkages that allow us to perhaps work more collaboratively, more easily. So, for example, we had research published back in 2022, which compared all of the Architects Acts across all of the countries that have Architects Acts. And that was just part of our starting point as well in kind of gathering data about how well are architects represented at a government and at a policy-making level, which, of course, is currently under a lot of debate here in New South Wales.
Sure is, yes.
And you know, it was interesting. I observed that I think virtually every country that had an Architects Act has it as a standalone act, in addition to
which
other
is what
acts.
we have now, but we're proposing to lose.
Yes. So it was an interesting point of comparison there when I was revisiting some of this data and research that we've done in the past.
Yeah, very interesting. That might be a good moment to stop for a little bit of music.
African way be a woman back, yeah. Woman by woman back, yeah. Woman by woman, tell my way be a woman back, Africa way be a woman back, woman by.
That's a track called Journey to Africa by Botier Oko from 2014. I'm Elizabeth Farrelly, here with you on the Sydneyist at Eastside Radio 89.7 FM or eastsidefm.org. And I'm speaking with architect Hugo Chan about the Commonwealth Association of Architects and both what they can do for the world, but also what Sydney can learn from them and from their work. So, Hugo, what can Sydney learn from these projects which use natural materials and make a point of using local labour and often encourage small enterprises and, you know, socially conscious endeavours of one kind or another? What is it that Sydney might take from this kind of project?
I think it's multifaceted in the sense of it depends on who you are. Speaking as an architect, I think it's actually been very eye-opening, despite having only been in the role for 3 months, to look at things from a different perspective, to kind of be encouraged at least to challenge the status quo, because we do have, we have a very developed body of laws and regulations. Some might say too much regulation, of course, but this idea that within those constraints, and as architects, as problem solvers, that's what we're kind of here to do, is to figure out better ways of doing things. And I think in some of these places where, we consider to be the global south, because they often have to make do with less, they actually are very good at doing a lot more with a lot less. That actually shows us, well, we don't need to build bigger, with more and so on, in order to create a beautiful space or a beautiful home.
Can you imagine Sydney changing in this way? I mean, how would it look if you imagine it, I don't know, maybe let's say 20 years hence, if we took some of these lessons on board? I mean, we're currently facing the housing crisis and the climate crisis at once. So it's not as though, although we're privileged, it's not as though there are no issues for Sydney or Australia to deal with. But how would you see some of these lessons being applied to change Sydney?
I think part of it probably starts with this conversation about how much we actually need.
Yes.
It reminded me recently, the NGV's just opened its architecture commission for this year, which I think is by Breathe Architects, which is looking at...
Wonderful Breathe.
Yes.
Yes.
And they're looking at... they've built this beautiful pine structure in the gardens, which I've yet to see, but I'm hoping to be in Melbourne to see it, where they're challenging, the size of the Australian home, which has been the topic of a lot of conversation.
Well, it's the biggest in the world, isn't it? Still,
Yes, or either that or second only to America.
Yes.
But do we really need it? Because I also know from the other end of town, if you will, that we now have a problem that, well, aside from the fact that people don't want to buy such big houses anymore, we've also got all of these houses starting to just sit around empty. And so that's going a long way, is that we fundamentally need to think about a diversity of what we offer in the market. But then I think looking more critically, thinking about our construction methods as well. I know we've talked a fair bit about natural building materials. I mean, one that stuck onto me through one of our CPD programs at the CAA was sugarcrete, which is currently being...
Oh, yes. What is sugarcrete?
It's effectively, well, it's a portmanteau, of course, of sugar and concrete, and it's actually made out of the byproducts of harvesting sugar. It's currently being developed, if I remember correctly, by the University of East London with a whole number of other partners, and they delivered a presentation for us recently where they're starting to look at this. It's obviously a lot lighter as a natural...
So it uses the fibre of the cane or something?
Yes.
As a reinforcing...
Exactly, exactly. And it's doing... I know it's still very early, and it's kind of at the forefront of what they're investigating. But, other things I think that it's high time we started revisiting. I think in terms of innovation and progress, there's a lot of the time we spend a lot of time thinking about, newer must be better.
Yes, we do. And we seem to be heading very much towards more and more sort of, if you like, synthetic materials and modes of building, a lot of, prefabrication and all this talk about, buildings being manufactured and not built. So do you think that the lessons that we might learn from Commonwealth countries would suggest moving in the opposite direction to that?
Yes, I think so. I think it's funny because despite how synthetic, if you will, our construction seems to be becoming, a lot of people still love, they run their hand on a tree, we run our hand on the grass, we love the feel of nature.
Yeah, biophilia is a real thing.
Exactly. Whether consciously or subconsciously, even as we experience the urban environment. And
all the more in many ways in the city, as it becomes more sophisticated.
Yes, and so I think there's this opportunity for us to revisit this, and possibly some of this is a lot of risk taking that has to be borne on.
That doesn't sound very Australian.
Yeah, so I think that's one of our opportunities is, looking at things around using waste. I mean, I've also seen examples of recycled plastic, which is incredible. I was in Bali a while ago, looking back at the hotel designed by OMA there, they've developed a system where they recycle all the plastic waste that they collect from the beaches. And what they've started doing is manufacturing the furniture used in their hotel rooms.
Whoa.
Out of this recycled
What's it like?
plastic.
Is it horrible?
Look, it's actually quite interestingly beautiful. I ended up buying coasters for myself, but they look like these kind of strange terrazzo tiles.
Sort of multicoloured.
Yes, and you know, I've now got I've talked to some friends who've said that, you know, even simple things like using recycled offcuts or tile samples that are sitting around our cities all the time, because, you know, the moment you go into a tile shop and you decide to take 10 home to look at, what will go nicely with my bathroom, and what people have started doing, for example, is smashing them and relaying them as effectively terrazzo. So there's kind
that
of
sounds a lot more fun, and a lot less sort of stitched up than our current aesthetic, which has everything so sort of smooth and neat and minimalist and dull, really.
Yeah, and, you know, one of the interesting things is that nature's never been that.
Yes,
despite our penchant
our
for
best
order.
efforts. That's right. So, look, let's talk now about the extent to which architects, in your view, can change this kind. This is cultural change sort of stuff, and there's big issues about changing the building industry and the procurement methods, and quite often architects are seen as fairly powerless in that machine. What do you think about how that might shift?
I think it starts from the self, and I think that's something that we at the CAA try very hard to push for. Of course, we do advocacy and we lobby governments. You know, we've had representation, and we continue to have representation at organizations like UN Habitat and the World Urban Forum, COP, CHOGM as well, the Commonwealth Heads of Government meetings. So yes, there's an international level where we do things, but at an individual level, which is what we try to do through our education initiatives and through our learning, which is why we have what we call the Knowledge Sharing Partnership, which is a signatory of 14 of our members, including Australia, who's one of the founding members of this initiative.
So that involves what?
So learning, you know, going out there, learning, understanding that these technologies,
like a continuing professional development kind of thing, and making courses available, or making doing site visits, and
and starting to weave that into education as well. So starting at a university level,
undergraduate education,
bridging the sustainable development goals.
So you'd go into schools of architecture and offer courses?
I think currently it's programs that they can then implement. So it's at a high level, because we don't necessarily have the education capacity to reach out to all of them. But one of the things that we push for as well is the sustainable development goals as being absolutely intrinsic to both our thinking day to day and our education.
Yeah. And do you see, we're just about going to have to wrap up, but I'm really interested in this question of the extent to which architects can have a voice and are prepared to have a voice, because in our culture we tend to see architects self-censoring and being very polite in order to basically get the next job. Do you, is there hope that your generation of architects might be more forthright, more passionate, more, more energetic about change?
I think there's a lot of people who are. I think I'm considered probably one of the quiet ones relative to some of my friends and international colleagues.
Yeah.
So there certainly is, and I'm very hopeful. I have to be, I think, for the future ahead, that we can meet these challenges, but we have to do it together.
One last question about you, not quite personally, but I'm not sure how long this role lasts for you. Is it a year?
2 years.
2 years. So do you see yourself, this suggests that you're seeing a future in politics as much as architecture. How do you see your future at the moment?
I'd like to say never, but I think my heart at the moment is in practice, I think, and in education.
Because you have your own little practice.
Yes. And I'm very fortunate to also teach. So that's where I am at the moment, but we'll see what the future holds.
Spreading ideas. We like that. It's a very good thing to be doing. I'm Elizabeth Farrelly, and I've been chatting with Sydney architect Hugo Chan from the Commonwealth Association of Architects, youth representative. Good night, everybody. Thank you, Hugo.
Thank you.
Hello, city dwellers. Ever wondered what makes Sydney tick? Well, hold on to your skyscrapers because the Sydneyist is about to unravel the secrets of the concrete jungle like never before. Together, we'll explore this vibrant metropolis from its foundations to its penthouses. We're not just talking about bricks and mortar, we're talking the soul of Sydney. I'm Elizabeth Farrelly. Join me Thursdays at 6 p.m. for the Sydneyist.